Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Hi, everyone. Feel free to turn on your cameras. Hi, guys. Come on in. Come on in, get cozy, pull up a chair. Hello, Ange. Hey, Kim, Kennedy, Jim's back, Derek Pennywood, Susie and Jim Pickett and Brad and Liz and Beverly and John. Hi, everyone. Oh, it's so wonderful to see all of you. Welcome. Really excited to have everybody here today. So right off the bat, before I bring up Chip and Tom, I got to apologize. You know, normally I'm at home. I'm not at home right now. I am at a middle of a Colorado Vietnamese restaurant. No lie. Coming to you live, the power of the internet. This is how dedicated I am to make sure we make this happen. So if it's a little weird and loud, I'm going to try to stay on mute now and then. So forgive me. So that's where I am in the world right now. I'm at a funky Vietnamese pho restaurant in Georgetown, Colorado. So where are you in the world? Pop it in the chat. I need to know. We've got folks from all over the world today. A ton of you from the Asia Pacific region, Australia. Welcome. Thank you to the MEAX team for helping put this together. Love it, love it, love it. This is great. I love these calls. It still delights me to feel connected to so many of you from all over the world, places I may never get to go to. So I am going to stop talking. I'm so excited that we have Tom Verghese and Chip here together in the same space. So Tom has been conducting interviews with us virtually from Australia. And here he is on the Baja campus, just finishing a week, and really excited. Tom is an amazing interviewer. I can't wait to see what kind of questions you will get out of Chip today. And so we will be fielding questions from all of you later on, as we typically do in the hour. So if you have questions, wait, I better put myself on the spotlight. You can't see me anymore, and then I'll get off. If you have questions, you can pop them in the chat. I'll keep my eyes on them. And then usually as we get closer to the end of the hour, Chip and Tom will invite some of you to raise your hands and to come up on stage. So punch that button like as soon as they say so, but not before, because it messes up our view. And I'll just put your hand down anyway. So when we tell you, be ready. All right, so with that, I am going to get off the stage. And Tom, welcome. Thank you so much for this conversation today. Thinking big. I am really excited, and I'm going to let you guys take it away.
Terrific. Thank you, Carrie. Well, you're in Boulder, Colorado, and I am in Baja, Mexico. How is that? Fantastic.
With Frida.
Frida.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Actually, it's been really great. I have been part of the MEA environment now for the last 3 years. And it's all been virtual. And this is my first time here in Baja. I've just spent a week here, and it's been a fabulous week. So I'm really excited coming to the end of the week. Sad, but really it's been a great week. So as Carrie was saying, my name is Tom Verghese. I am actually part of MEAX, which is in fact the first extension of the Modern Elder Academy outside of Mexico. So we are based in Australia and really look after MEA Asia Pac, really. And there are about 150 of you from Australia registered for the call. So really big welcome to all those people from down under. And a big welcome for those of you coming from around the world. I know there's 500 of you who have registered for the call. So it's a great pleasure to welcome you here. And I've got to say, it's so fantastic to be able to have this conversation with Chip. And we were just saying before how this is kind of really close. You know, like we're kind of, I don't know how you normally sit this close when you're having a conversation. But I'm reminded, you know, in many parts of Asia Pacific, space proximity is actually a cultural issue, right? So in many parts of Asia Pacific, people would be sitting really close and it wouldn't be an issue. So we'll pretend that we're part of the APAC region instead. Anyway, Chip Conley needs actually probably no introduction. He's been an entrepreneur, he's a disruptor, a modern elder. He's done a bunch of things. New York best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author. I mean, he's done so many things, and I know you know his bio. But I have got to say, Chip, in being here this week, up close and personal, there would be 3 things I would add to your official bio. I would say, I have watched you this week. I think you are an extremely effective teacher.
Thank you.
That's been really, I love the way you've kind of put some of those concepts across, especially this week. We had some new concepts that you were introducing from your new book, which we'll have a chance to talk about. The other thing I would say that I've noticed is you are actually a very powerful coach.
Thank
So
you.
I've noticed that as well up front. And the final thing I would say is you
I
are
need to take more showers.
No, you're extremely time efficient.
Oh, for sure.
No, that's been really impressive, because I have to say there were a couple of times when we were doing some of those sessions and I was thinking to myself, I'm not sure how we're going to wrap this up on time, and bang.
Yeah. I pray to the gods of efficiency, which is sometimes not so great, but time is really, as we get older, the most important asset we have. So I like to use it well.
Great. So Chip, this is actually 5 years.
Tell us, wait, before we get in, you just need to know a little more about Tom, I think. So because Tom, first of all, is an amazing interviewer, because we've done some MEA interviews. So you grew up in
Malaysia.
Yeah,
I grew up in Malaysia. My parents are of Indian ethnicity.
Yes.
And I went to Australia as a international student, a foreign student.
And you never went back.
No, I mean, visited, of course, but made Australia my home. Yeah. And I've lived in Melbourne for the last kind of 30 years. And right now I'm in the process of moving to Perth.
Yeah.
So in fact, my wife has moved across with our son, and our daughter's living there. So this is going to be a transition that we're trying out for 12 months, which in fact came out of a retreat that we did as part of MEAX last year.
Yeah.
So we're taking action on an insight that came out of it. So yeah, and I've been a consultant in the area of diversity, inclusion, and equity and cross-culture for the last 30 years. But I came across your work 4 years ago when I read your book. And because I'm interested in the whole
wisdom at work.
Yeah, wisdom at work. We reached out, and then you introduced me to MEAX. So it's quite a circle. And great pleasure to be here. And I've got to say, for those of you who haven't, because I did the MEA courses, the initial courses were all the online courses. Yeah, so I did the beta transitions course, and then did the follow-up, did the purpose course, and this is my first time here. So it's been a nice entry point. And I know for some other people, they start with the face-to-face and then move online. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, for those who don't know it, so we have really sort of 3 kinds of programs MEA does. We have our workshops. That was really what we were doing for 5 years now. And then, of course, COVID came along. And for about almost 20 months, we were not doing any workshops. But we had a beautiful campus here on the beach. You like the campus?
Yes, beautiful.
And we wanted to make sure that we kept the campus open. We closed for 6.5 months, but then we opened with something called sabbatical sessions, which are generally longer stays, lighter programming. It's like a vacation with an education and wellness component. And so a lot of people started coming to that, and they'd never done a workshop. And then they got involved in online, because we started online programs at the same time. And that was only a little over a year ago that we actually opened up for workshops again here in Baja. And so those, sometimes people start with sabbatical sessions, or with online, and they end up at workshops, or vice versa. And soon enough, we'll have 2 campuses in Santa Fe, New Mexico as well. One of them opening about a year from now.
Terrific. It's great to see this expansion. So this has all happened in the last 5 years. So we are going to be talking about thinking big and redefining midlife. But I want to also take this opportunity to look back over the last 5 years and look at what you've learned in setting this enterprise up, and how you've disrupted changed the whole aging conversation around the world. And my first question, though, Chip, is, are you having fun?
I started a company long ago called Joie de Vivre. And it was 24 years into having a company named after the French expression for joy of life that I realized I was not having fun, was not having joy anymore. And that's one of the many reasons I decided to sell. I have no interest in selling, which means I'm still having fun.
Right.
I would say that, I was a for-profit entrepreneur for many years, a boutique hotelier, disrupting the hospitality business with boutique hotels, and then again disrupting the hospitality business with Airbnb, because the three founders of Airbnb asked me to join them 10 years ago to be their modern elder. And both of those times I was a for-profit entrepreneur. Now I'm a social entrepreneur. And I will say that I feel a lot of oxygen coming into my life.
Right.
I feel like I'm doing something transformative to individuals who are getting benefit out of it while also addressing societal need. Not only am I having fun, I feel like I'm doing important work in the world.
Right.
And that's when your purpose kicks in. And if you feel a sense of purpose, you are more likely to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, great. And that's definitely one of the important things, isn't it? As we get older, that having that sense of purpose, being involved in something is really important for us.
Yeah, no, so Dr. Phil Pizzo at Stanford has shown that the three most important foundational experiences in your life that you need to have after age 50 are purpose, community, and wellness. And often when people retire or they actually wind down their working life, they lose purpose and community pretty quickly for obvious reasons. What a lot of people are surprised by is how much they lose wellness, because without the structure and discipline of full-time work or the idea of going to an office and being seen by others, a lot of people actually spend more time in front of the telly, as you would call it in Australia, the TV in the US and elsewhere. And so, what ends up happening is they lose their wellness too.
Yes.
So purpose.
Why don't you share that statistic that you shared with us this week?
The average American retiree watches 47 hours of TV a week, which basically means you trade your job for a television. And so that's part of the reason people lose their wellness.
Yeah, that's a lot of time, isn't it?
No.
Just watching TV. So let's talk about the last 5 years. I'm really keen to hear what you've learned in the last 5 years. And I'd like to structure it in terms of, firstly, what have you learned in dealing with the students? Because you've dealt with students now. I think we've had students from 40 countries.
Yeah, over 40.
Yeah, 40 countries, about 3,000.
This week we have Sembe. Those of you who have seen Sembe in the course, he flew in from Japan for this week.
Yeah.
We have OC, who flew in from Israel. We have a number of Canadians. I think that and then of course we have a lot of Americans. I don't know if there's anybody else. Sometimes there's a UK.
Gary was also from Israel.
Oh yeah, GD from Israel as well. Yeah. So yeah, we have a lot of people. So you want me to answer that one in terms of?
Well, so I'm curious to hear what you've learned in terms of dealing with the students, right? So you've dealt with now 3,000 students, 40 countries. So what are some common themes perhaps that you've learned about that? So I'd like to start with that. And then I'd like to start with what have you learned in terms of running a social enterprise compared to a not-for-profit?
Sure. Okay. Well, so in terms of the students, I mean, why do people come to MEA? And many of you are alums, so you know that you have your own answer. But I would say the number one reason that people come to MEA is because they're in the transition for something. And the transition could be, we go through so many transitions in midlife. It could be parents passing away, being an empty nester, getting divorced, changing careers, changing where you live, feeling some early stirrings of some soulful spiritual awakening inside of yourself, having a health diagnosis that puts you at risk. There's a lot, menopause. So there's an awful lot of things that are happening in this midlife era. And so I'd say the number one reason people come is because they're in transition and they're trying to figure out how to navigate the midlife transition. And that's part of the reason we have starting about a week from now, 6 days from now, our Navigating Midlife Transitions online course coming up. I'd say that's the number one reason people come. And I think that that's a commonality. I think
So
almost
regardless of which part of the world they're from.
this part of the world they're from, I think pretty much commonly there people are going through some transition. It could even be just the transition of aging.
Mhm.
You know, many of you have heard me say that Becca Levy from Yale, who's a good friend of MEA, has shown in her research that when people actually shift from a negative to a positive perspective on aging, they gain 7.5 years of additional life. Which is amazing, you know, in terms of just how much, not only do you get more life, you get better life because you're generally happier. And yet we don't do much as a society to help people to combat the societal message about ageism, the idea that age is a bad thing. I grew up, I grew up in California, and then I spent, 35, 40 years in the San Francisco Bay Area. So there were redwood trees near me, and we marveled at the old growth redwoods. Well, we should be marveling at the old growth humans, because I do believe that aging and growing are they're synonymous, but we tend to think of aging as a bad thing and growing as a good thing. But that's partly because we're so possessed by our physical body, whether it's our beauty or our brawn, as the determinant of, a status. And, the truth is that as we get older, our body isn't as good as it used to be, but our heart, emotional intelligence improves with age. Our soul, spiritual intelligence grows with age. Emotional moderation, the ability to actually moderate our emotions, grows with age. The U-curve of happiness research shows that actually happiness grows with age after age 50. So again, your mileage may vary, but the bottom line is we don't have a lot of programs out there that help people to understand that actually life can get better once you've gotten through the midlife crisis. Now, I hate the word crisis, as you know.
Yeah.
I call it now the midlife chrysalis, because the chrysalis is midlife for the butterfly. And it may be a time that's dark and gooey and somewhat solitary, but it's also where the transformation happens. And I do believe that, it's not a crisis, it's a calling, and that this era in midlife is an era where people actually can learn so much about themselves that allows them to then make a difference in the world in all kinds of new ways.
And again, I think what I've seen it this week, and in my experience of being on the online courses, which had people from all over the world, there was certainly some commonalities on it. And of course, different degrees, right, of how it's perceived. And we saw it this week here in the face-to-face. But it's all around transitions.
It is around transitions, and it's a wide variety of ages. I mean, we call, we say we're a midlife wisdom school, the world's first midlife wisdom school. So what is midlife? I mean, midlife used to be considered 40 to 60, then 40 to 65. So many sociologists now consider it 35 to 75, which is a really long time. But we've had people as young as 28 and as old as 88 come to workshops. So midlife is there's a broad brush. And the word elder can be sometimes there's risk with that word. Some people don't love the word because they don't want to be considered an elder because it sounds like elderly. On the other hand, there's people who say, well, gosh, I don't deserve to be an elder, because when I think of elders, I think of the people you have reverence for. A modern is someone who's as curious as they are wise, and they're not looking for reverence, they're looking for relevance. And relevance means that you have gotten clear on what you have to offer the world, but you also know enough about where the world is that you know how to offer that wisdom in a way that people can understand it. As opposed to someone who just is speaking a language that a millennial or a Gen Z person might not get.
Yes, I like how you frame it in terms of, it's one thing about being, it's one thing having all the knowledge, right, and having all the wisdom, but how do I distill it in such a way so that it's relevant to the listener?
Well, and I think knowledge and wisdom are two different things. I did not know this. So back a few years ago, when I joined Airbnb, the three young founders asked me to join them. And then after a couple months, they said, you're a modern elder. And I said, I don't like that. And they explained it's someone who's as curious as you're wise. And then they said to me, we hired you for your knowledge, what you've really brought is your wisdom. And I got to say, 10 years ago, I wasn't really clear on the difference between knowledge and wisdom. So the way I think of knowledge and wisdom today is the following. Knowledge is something that you accumulate. You accumulate knowledge. It is, in a mathematical way, it's like a plus sign. It's something you accumulate over time. Your knowledge can become obsolescent in some ways, especially in the tech world.
Yeah.
But knowledge is something that you have a localized focus on. So you could be exceptionally knowledgeable about one particular thing, but not knowledgeable about a bunch of other things. When it comes to wisdom, knowledge may be local, but wisdom's global. So when someone is wise, it's across all kinds of domains. It's not specific to a particular knowledge domain. It is across a broader collection of things, because you actually have a bit of pattern recognition and you have a better understanding of humans. So knowledge has nothing to do with humans. Wisdom does. It's understanding and having the intuition and pattern recognition to be able to see things and understand what's going to happen next. And so it's about connecting the dots. My definition, or MEA's definition for wisdom, is metabolized experience that leads to distilled compassion. So let me unpack that for a moment. So when I wrote this book, Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder, that came out about 4.5 years ago, I was having a hard time finding a common definition of wisdom. It seemed like there were a lot of different definitions, and I didn't have the definition I just mentioned, metabolized experience that leads to distilled compassion. Over time, I got clear that metabolized experience, how do you distill, that was a word you just used a moment ago, Tom, how do you distill down your life lessons in such a way that you've learned from them? And I think that's really essential. I mean, that is what wisdom is. But it took me another year or two to realize that wasn't enough, because metabolized experience could mean you're savvy. You're savvy, and to be savvy means you're really smart. But often a person who's savvy can be sort of like a little bit, I don't want to say selfish, but self-motivated. Wisdom is a common good. It's a social good. It's going back to the Greek times. It has always been seen as an asset or a quality that someone can offer others. And so that's why the second part of this, metabolized experience that leads to distilled compassion. The distilled compassion allows you to make a difference in other people's lives and to actually customize your wisdom to that particular person. That's the distilled compassion. So I think of knowledge as a plus sign. You accumulate it. I think of wisdom as a division sign. It's the square root. It's like the thing at the base. It's like the essence of something. And in a world in which we're awash in knowledge, all of the world's knowledge is on this little phone, this little magic rock in my pocket. What's scarce is not knowledge, is wisdom. And I think this is particularly true in the workplace. So I think that wisdom is on the rise,
right? And
I think wisdom workers are going to become, we'll have language around that in the next 20 years. Just like, again, Peter Drucker coined the term knowledge worker in 1959. No one had any idea what he was talking about. No one knew the value of computers. But now today, the world is ruled by knowledge workers. So, and soon enough, we're going to be ruled by AI and robots. And so AI and robots will have lots of knowledge, but will they have wisdom? Probably not.
Great. So thank you for that. So thanks for giving us that broad explanation around wisdom and knowledge, and also what you've learned from dealing with students. What about the second part, which is over the last 5 years, what have you learned about running a social enterprise, which will be, of course, very different to running a chain of hotels, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, also in Airbnb.
Well, there's a social obligation. I've always, with all the businesses I've been involved in, had a mission orientation to make a difference in the world. But when you run a place like MEA, you better have socioeconomic diversity. You better do your best to try to have, financial aid and scholarship programs that allow for a more interesting and diverse group of people in a cohort, if possible. Why is that important? Well, as my co-founder, Jeff Hamui, says, wisdom is not taught, it's shared. So if wisdom is shared and you're just hanging out with a bunch of people that are just like the people you hang out with at home, you're not learning something new. I think one of the beauties, and I hope you found that this week, Tom, is what just being in a cohort of collection of people who are so diverse really allows you to see the world in some new ways.
Yep.
So I think that's one piece on the social enterprise side. Clearly, we're in a business of helping break people open in a positive way, such that they can transform. That's tiring.
Yes, it is.
It is very
It's
tiring.
exhausting.
I'm teaching 4 weeks right now, and fortunately, this week my co-founders Jeff and Christine have carried the main load this week for me, because doing 4 weeks in a row is a lot. So I think I've learned how to pace myself a little bit. If this was 2 or 3 years ago, maybe let's say pre-COVID, I would have said, "Oh, I'll do all 4 weeks in a row," and from start to finish. And I was like, "Nope, I know that would I'd be spent, as opposed to invested." And so I think that's another lesson. I think another lesson is this idea of social wellness. When we think of wellness, we often think of our personal wellness, our sleep, how we eat, how we exercise. It's very much an individualistic mentality, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. What supplements you take, etc. But what's so relevant, and the book that came out 2 weeks ago from Dr. Robert Waldinger from Harvard, who he and his studies have been working on with a group of people for 85 years now, has shown that the number one variable for people who live long, good lives is their social relations, their sense of community connection. And Dan Buettner, who some of you saw us 2 days ago on an online call with him, who started the Blue Zones, number one element of longevity that's consistent across the 5 Blue Zones in the world is community. And similarly, Phil Pizzo, as we talked about earlier, purpose, community, and wellness. Community is the one that is probably the most important of those 3. So the social wellness that I see here, and that the sense of belonging and the thirstiness for life-changing conversations and moving beyond talking about the external weather, oh, it's a beautiful day, to talking about the internal weather. I think we are in a society that deeply needs that.
Right.
And I think post-COVID, even more so.
And I suppose what coming to a place like this does is that it actually gives permission. Right. For people to actually talk about that.
Well, I think because when people come here, they don't have each other's LinkedIn profiles, nor do they have, nobody knows each other's last name. There's a freedom that comes with actually being slightly anonymous. No one knows your story unless you want to tell it. And what that allows for is the disrobing of identities that may no longer serve you. And those of you who've been here know that we do an exercise, which I won't talk about, in the first 24 hours that really, really takes that home, such that people realize within the first 24 hours, what are the mindsets and the identities and ways of thinking and habits that aren't serving us anymore. And maybe this week I actually can live without those. And let's see how I feel. And what ends up happening is people feel like they're flourishing without having to be the hero, or without having to be the caretaker. And because of that, I think that we are really fortunate to create the space for people to reimagine themselves as a beginner again. Christy, one of my co-founders, is brilliant. She's our chief experience officer, and she has, whether it's the bread making exercises or going surfing, which the group did this morning, which if you'd asked them at the start of the week, no one would have done it probably. But by the end of the week, it's like, okay, I'm going to try this. Or learning improv, or learning to be vulnerable with other people. Or there's so many different things that people learn for the first time. Because one of the things we need to learn in midlife is how to have a growth mindset, to be open to learning new things and improving ourselves. Because a fixed mindset is really problematic. There's not any data on this yet, but I do know some researchers who are actually looking at right now, people who have a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, how many additional years of life do you get from a growth mindset? It seems like it may be as many as 10 years.
Right. Well, it's quite substantial,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So if we now just take a peek into the future, what do you see for the Modern Elder Academy? So let's go 5 years out,
Mhm.
you know, and then
Yes.
perhaps another 5 years. So what do you see?
I wanted to see, I know Sembe, can we actually, for 1 second, put Gabriella's on off mute?
Sure.
Just
Gabrielle,
a
take
sec.
yourself off mute and raise your hand so I can find you.
Oh, I see them. Gabriella, are you there?
I'm looking for her. There
Oh, there she
they
is.
are. Hold on, let
So-
me bring you guys up.
I just wanted to say for a second, and then, you know, in a couple minutes, we're gonna open for questions. So why don't we actually start with people raising their hands if you want to ask questions for Tom or me. But look who's here. I bet some of you from the MEA community know Sembe, because Sembe has actually not only been on online calls like this before, but he's an alumnus of both the transitions and purpose online courses, and he flew in from Japan for this week's workshop. How you doing, Sembe?
Hi, I'm happy to join this program.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Sembe-san. All right.
And Sembe did led a part of the session today on Ikigai.
Oh, you got
All
it.
right. It was, and it, it was very good the way he kind of gave it the Japanese kind of context
Exactly.
to the concept. So, and he's been great fun.
Yes.
He's
So why don't we
been
do maybe one or two more questions, and then
yeah,
we'll go to.
so let's do the future. Let's 5 years. What do you see? What do you see for yourself? 5 years in the Modern Elder,
Yeah.
the next 5 years after that. So look at
Well, I think moving to having 2 campuses in the US is a big step for us, because our biggest market is the United States in terms of people who come down here to Baja. And both of those campuses are substantially larger than this campus. One of them being a ranch with retired horses that are regenerating the land. It's beautiful. And that'll be twice the size of this, but it's much larger also on land area too. And then another location where we'll have 4 times as much capacity as we have here, which is a former Catholic retreat center and seminary next to St. John's College on Museum Hill. And so I think that's going to really make us even maybe more high profile.
right.
So more people will learn about us and know about us as a result of being there. I think the most important thing is to create a global movement. And I think the MEAX team in Australia has really helped us, because our APAC chapter, regional chapter, we have 26 regional chapters around the world of alumni. And our APAC regional chapter was our most active one in the world. And so that team came together and helped create something called MEAX, which is an extension of MEA in a region. And they've done an amazing job of leading workshops and encouraging people to come to the online programs that we have globally, doing events in the region. And so I think the process of us creating a global movement is really a process of catalyzing our alumni to connect with each other and connect with their friends and family members to help give some attention to this idea that our primary focus as an organization is how do we help reframe aging, help people cultivate and harvest their own wisdom, and to empower a regenerative lifestyle such that we have even these regenerative communities, residential communities around regenerative farms or ranches. So I'd say that's the number one thing is how do we do that? And we're very proud of, we've signed a contract with the United Nations. So we're doing one of the subsidiary of the United Nations. So we're doing some collaboration with them because this is the decade of healthy aging, the UN's decade of healthy aging. So that's part of what we'll be doing as well, is trying to be a thought leader in helping people to understand that if more and more of us are going to live to 100, my gosh, you're basically at halfway through your adult life at age 59 if you're going to live to 100. 59, how most of us at age 59 think, oh my God, it's all almost over. Well, no, if you're going to live to 100, 59 is halfway between 18 and 100.
Yeah, still got quite a way to go,
Yes.
right? And so do you see that, for instance, I just want to segue from there before we open up for questions, in terms of the major trends globally, since we have a global audience, what do you think are some of the trends globally when it comes to the whole demographic of aging, mindsets, attitude?
There's the New York Times just had an article come out. It's actually in the newsletter. It's called the Deal Book newsletter. If you sign up for it, you'll find it. And actually, I'm going to write a Wisdom Well post on this soon. So Wisdom Well is our daily blog. You can just subscribe to it for free on the MEA website. This article in Deal Book talked about what's really fascinating right now, which is that in France, just this week, Macron suggested that the retirement age will grow from 62 to 64.
Right.
And a lot of people got crazy. I mean, like a lot of protests. But he said, we cannot financially afford to have the retirement age so low. Actually, over 15% of France's annual budget goes to the retirement, pensions for people who are French. So I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that, and all of the risks politically of that. But also look at China. China just this last week also announced that in 2022, their population declined. Japan's been dealing with this for a little while, but China, I don't think anybody expected China to be here this quickly. When you have a country where people are living longer and there's fewer people being born, the average age of the population rises. And what does that mean? Well, if you don't solve the France problem, you have a huge problem, because not only do you have more and more people retiring young and living longer, and that's expensive, but you don't have enough new people coming into the system to actually help pay the taxes to make that work. So that's one fiscal issue that I think we've got going on. Beyond that, I think we have a real opportunity, which is to have more and more older people in their 60s and 70s, maybe even their 80s, choosing to work way past what has historically been perceived as their retirement age. And not only is this often good for them, but sometimes it's necessary. People sometimes don't retire by choice, but also mostly by necessity. And I think what that means is companies are going to have to start getting smarter about how they recruit older workers. How do we elevate people who are wisdom workers, who have something to bring to the table at age 65, being hired in a company, as opposed to someone who's 35. A 35-year-old has all kinds of great things to bring to the table, but a 65-year-old has a different set of things. And I think, again, in a world of AI, artificial intelligence, I think we're going to value more and more of what that 65-year-old has to bring to the table, whether it's intuition, creativity, psychological safety on teams, variety of things. So crystallized intelligence, as Arthur Brooks wrote about in his book From Strength to Strength. He's been a big fan of MEA as well. So that's it.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you.
Should we open it up?
Yeah, let's open it up to some questions. So we'd like you to put your hands up.
Yeah.
And we have Christopher's in. He's our man from Sydney. Hey, Christopher.
Yes, Tom. Thanks a lot. I've learned a lot. I've heard Chip speak before, but I always learn something new. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Look, I turn 65 in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to see how far I can actually change what I do and how I do that, and how open the world is. But my question is about something we haven't mentioned. We've mentioned about living longer and extra years. We've mentioned about people being born. We haven't mentioned about death. And death and dying is a very big issue, as the world would see it for elders. And I just wonder what the modern elder academy has to say, if it can actually say anything meaningful about death, and making us appreciate what a motivator that is to actually get the most out of this last quarter or last third.
Yeah, well, we had in October, just 3 months ago, we had a workshop called Love, Death, and Human Connection. And we had Michael Hebb join us. Michael started something called a movement called Death Over Dinner that's globally. And he's also the one who's recently started MEA's Generations Over Dinner program. So I guess I'll quote Michael, and he would say that death is an organizing principle for life. It helps you to understand what this moment means. Laura Kirstensen at Stanford has shown that when people actually know that they have less time in their life, they are less future oriented and more in the present moment. And whether that's someone who had AIDS, has AIDS from years ago, and that was a death sentence at one time, or whether it's someone who has cancer, or someone who is just, aged and late in life, to know that actually when you know your time on the planet is shorter, it means that you focus on the moments, the present moment even more, is a beautiful prescription for happiness. And so I would say that is one element, but so that's one side of it. The other side of it is, people think that they're going to die a lot sooner than they are. Men, I'll just use this one because I know the data point here. Men who are 65 in the United States are almost 70% of them underestimate how many years they still have to live based upon actuarial tables. Because often what we see longevity. So longevity in the United States right now is 77 years old. So if you're at 65 and then you say, oh, I have 12 years left. Well, first of all, women live 6 years longer than men. So you have to look at that. And there's all kinds of other demographic differences in this as well. But longevity just tells you from birth how long you're going to live till you potentially die. When you have more years under your belt, your longevity goes up. So when you're 65, the average age of dying for a 65-year-old in the US is not 77, it's 83. And so we, again, underestimate how much life we have left. So I guess I have two answers for you there, Christopher. One is that death it's important to integrate death into your life all the time. To memento mori, I think.
Memento mori.
Yes.
Keep death daily in front of your eyes.
That's right.
Yes.
But at the same time, to actually realize death is probably far out there in the future. So it's a classic modern elder answer, because modern elders are all about alchemy. How do you take polarities and turn it into a beautiful stew? So I think both of those are important.
Terrific. Thank you for that question, Christopher. We can see that Mike, he's in Adelaide. He's got his hand up.
Hello, Mike.
Mike has been here to Baja. He was one of the early participants.
He was.
Hey, great to see you both, and thank you very much for running these sessions. They are just a terrific way for people like myself to stay connected. My question is about busyness. And Chip, you model very much a very busy life. And my sense has been increasingly from connection to MEA teachings to learn how to make less more and how to be less busy as a way of creating space to learn more and live more. Can you, Chip, can you talk to us a bit about that tension around busyness and our attraction to busyness, and also the importance of using this time well, which almost kind of pressures you a bit to be busy?
Yeah. So as an MEA alum once said to me, busy is the new stupid. And he had heard that from someone else, but what it meant is the idea that, it's the number one thing we often say when we're greeting someone else, especially someone we haven't seen in a while that we know. I'm so busy. And yet busyness, it's interesting that business is also busyness. I think busyness can be an addiction. And it's an addiction when you are being busy because you're distracting yourself from something else. Whether it's your emotions, whether it's some big disappointment, whether it's a self-esteem issue. So I think busyness has some risks. You have to sort of look at, I like to look at calling versus workaholism. So when someone is a workaholic, they do it for the sake of compulsion, or they're compulsed to do it, and they do it for the sake of distraction. And it's actually often in a workaholic mode, it's coming from inside, but it's actually often very much external. It's trying to keep up, it's trying to look good, etc. When you're living your calling, both of these states could be busy. But when you're living your calling, it's coming from something inside of yourself. And it's an internal motivation. It's an inspiration, even to quote Simon, who was in this week's cohort, who was giving me the etymology of inspiration versus motivation. And when it's coming from inside of you, the process of being busy feels as if it's why you're here on the planet. Now, you have to be a little careful. I'll speak for myself. I have to be a little careful when I am in that mode that I don't become too one-dimensional, because that's the natural risk associated with someone who has a strong sense of purpose, a deep sense of calling, that you actually sort of put the blinders on and you just work endlessly. And I have, I guilty as charged for me on that. And yet what I do to help break that up is a few things. Number one is I meditate every day. And even if it's 5 minutes, in fact, I will do a meditation right after this, because right after this, about a half hour after we're off, we do go into graduation, and I need to be fresh for graduation. And so I'll go meditate for 5 minutes in a private place to just restore myself, 5 or 10 minutes. So that's important. I do a lot of exercise as a way of trying to be out of my brain. One of the challenges with busyness is that your brain can just get very stuck in in where your synapses are firing, and just the neural pathways get sort of way too familiar. And so I like to exercise because it puts me in my body. I also like to go walking with my dog, as many of you know, Jamie. I call it spying on the divine, when I do a longer walk, and I do what is also known as an awe walk, AWE. And so all of those things are some of my antidotes to trying to actually break up my busyness. But I also know that I work best at 5 a.m. And my team knows that. They get emails from me, but I don't expect them to respond to them. And on the weekend, sometimes I'll actually wait on emails till Monday, but most of the time I'll write them. But I don't want anybody to respond to me on the weekend unless it's an emergency. If it's an emergency, I'll text you or WhatsApp you. So I don't expect people to operate at my level of busyness. And I think that's really important as a leader to say that. It's hard because people will want to emulate you. But your form of what's going to be make you productive and especially creative, busyness is not good for creativity. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life in terms of how it works for you. For you, it might be that you love staying up till midnight and doing some emails. For me, I could never do that. It wouldn't happen. So I see Allison is actually, look at her. So excellent. We're going to move on from that question, Mike, but we miss you. And we're going to go to another Aussie named Glenn.
Hi there, gentlemen. Great to see you. Great to see you.
Likewise.
Chip, you're always ahead of the curve, and so I've noticed that you've been writing some things about disrupting tertiary education. What role would modern elders play in that, do you think?
Yeah. And when you say, just to make sure everybody understands tertiary education, please define it for us, because that's not a language. That's not.
Oh, sorry. That'd be university education or anything after high school.
Yeah. So colleges and universities, I'll speak for the US because I know that the best. Colleges and the universities in the US are in a world of hurt. It was about 8 years ago that Clay Christensen, who coined the term disruptive innovation, said that in the next 10 to 15 years, 50% of the US colleges and universities will go out of business. Now, that was pre-COVID, and COVID only made it worse. And it has not been anything like 50% yet. It's been about 5 to 10% so far, but the number is going to actually continue to grow. So how could modern elders, or how could midlife wisdom schools or midlife transition programs help to keep these beautiful campuses alive? Well, one way is for these programs, these universities, to actually imagine, what if you, instead of doing all of your recruiting to high school students, what if you actually started looking at recruiting people in midlife to come back and do a 1-year certificate on campus and being in classrooms with people 30 years younger than you? I think it makes a lot of sense. Mary Catherine Bateson said we need a midlife atrium. The atrium is when you actually have space and maybe a gap year to reimagine things. So I think that's one possibility. I think another possibility is that if a university is actually going to close altogether, then maybe an entrepreneur comes along and says, let's take over this beautiful campus and create 1-year gap year programs for people in midlife, accredited, and programs that allow people to upskill or reskill, but also allow them to have the space. The problem with a lot of the language around midlife education is it's about upskilling and reskilling. And the problem with that it has there's beautiful things around it in terms of learning technology. That's a great thing. But 2 problems with it. Number one is it's all based upon sort of macroeconomic trends like, oh, software programmers are the thing of the future, so we're going to turn you into software programmer. But like that's a one size fits all solution. And secondly, it doesn't really allow a person to tap into their own dreams of what it is that they want to do. And what I like to call same seed, different soil. What have you learned along the way that you might be able to apply in a whole new industry? As I did, luckily, with Airbnb, I went into the tech industry. I had a hospitality focus and they did too, but Airbnb is a tech company, first and foremost. So I really do think that helping people to understand they have more options available to them and helping universities understand this is a great market of people who can help pay the bills of the college or university, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, Glenn. So we should bring Allison on.
So she has the same last name as you. I want to see
Yes, my
that.
wife.
Let's move this over here. Hello, Allison. Oops, you're actually on mute.
Okay, there we go. I was saying good morning, very early morning from Perth, Australia. So 7 o'clock in the morning here, and it's boiling heat wave. So yes, this is my opportunity actually to say hello to Tom and hi Chip as well, and hope everyone's having a good time.
Yep.
And I just sort of wanted to comment because some of the Australian folk know that, one of the ideas we had going on the retreat was to come to Perth. So real time in real action, I'm here and Raj is here. But what is really interesting is that sort of observation of myself from being from uber busy in Melbourne, kind of getting ready to come to Perth and then coming here and, just not having any of those kind of normal anchors of schedule and community and all that kind of stuff. And just being very sort of conscious of that. And so, yeah, very much in that sort of messy middle. Enjoying it, but just very mindful of, the fact that you really are stripped bare of all the things that made you who you were in your previous kind of place. So very modern elder. Just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
No, I'm here.
Yeah.
She's done the heavy lifting and moved us across while I've come here. So there you go. What can I say? I'm a very fortunate man.
I think, what I'll say though, as a quick thought is, I think there's real beauty in creating spaciousness in one's life, especially in the second half of our life. If the first half of our life, our primary operating systems are ego, and the second half it's our soul, there's an opportunity to listen a little bit more deeply to those voices, the positive voices, the desires, the passions, the curiosities. The number one thing I would say to you, Allison, is this is a great time to be curious. It was hard to be curious when you were younger, because being curious is not an efficient emotion or way of being. And when you're in your 40s, you have to be efficient. You have a lot of spinning plates. But as we get older, we have the space to be curious again. And curiosity is proven to be the elixir of life. So maybe just imagine something to be curious about that you might not have given attention to 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Who's next?
Great. Okay, so we've got Beverly and then Penny and then Robin, and we've got to wrap it up.
We do. All
Hey,
right,
Beverly.
Firstly, I would like to say thank you, Chip, for all the wonderful work you're doing and starting this MEA revolution, and to Tom for being his usual amazing interviewer and the work that he's doing as well. And as a global person, because I've lived in many countries, and I lived in France for 10 years till about 2 years ago, when I returned to Australia thinking I was coming here just for 3 months to be with my elderly in-laws and escape the high numbers of COVID. I've been in France when they strike, and en grève is, I used to see it written everywhere, and it means strike, and the firemen and different people, it was on there permanently, the ambulance services. And I know there will be huge revolutions about not wanting to change it, because the last time they tried to change it to 62 a few years ago was actually the students who did the most protesting, because they didn't want that change to happen. And they're very strict. It's very much a social country. Yesterday I went to So Chic, So French event, which was $99 to go in, and everything else was plus. You know, they have social parties in France where you pay $2, and the drinks are all set at $2. Everything is set at a certain level. But you know, I'm very much into astrology, philosophy, and I believe that everything happens in cycles. And because you mentioned France, you know, in 1779 there was a big revolution, and things happen in cycles, and it was the French who changed things and gave freedom to the people. And now philosophers are saying that the power is coming to the people now in 2023, so we can't change it. And Chip, you mentioned about AI and technology, and I've been involved in a lot of business with technology and health, for example. And yeah, things will be touching a phone and our health will be read, and we can change our blood pressure and so forth. Technology is changing. It's the world of technology, but mundane jobs will be changing for robots as well. But it's a place for people to connect with their heart and passion and do what they choose. Yep. So I personally think,
I'm so sorry. We it's the top of the hour and we have to go soon. So thank you. I really appreciate your perspective, especially having spent so much time in France. Is there any last thing you want to say?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on mindset? Because I've worked a lot with people, depression, especially the last 2 years, depression, anxiety, suicide. Yep. How are we going to help those with getting onto your program?
Well, let me maybe wrap, because Penny, we may not be able to get to you. I feel badly. Is that okay? Okay. You know, mindset is something, it's like the fish that the water that the fish swims in. So it is, it's a complex thing. How do you help people shift their mindset? Often you need someone as your observer, your enlightened witness, who helps you with that. And so I would just say that if you're involved in MEA, if you're going to do an MEA online program, we help a lot with that. I think the upcoming transitions course that starts next week is really a great place to learn more about the difference between a growth mindset. But you could also read Carol Dweck's book. Carol Dweck's book is called Mindset, and highly recommend. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think at this point we're going to have to wrap. We're going to bring Carrie back in and just say, what a joy to have you here. Thank you. You're an amazing interviewer. And I can just say, Carrie has put together a spectacular online program on navigating midlife transitions. And Carrie, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chip. Thank you, Tom Verghese. I always want to make your last name Italian. I don't know why. Tom Verghese, Chip Conley. How great was that, you guys? All the things we got to learn. We do have an online campus. We have a Baja campus. Soon we'll have a Santa Fe campus. So you can jump in next week. We're starting the transitions course. We have a discount code of MEA 150 for those of you in South America, North America. We have an MEA X 150 code for those of you in APAC. You guys will all get the recording of this call probably tomorrow. And this will be posted on our YouTube channel where you can see all sorts of interesting conversations. Chip just spoke with Dan Buettner of the Blue Zones 2 days ago, and lots of great stuff on there. So with that, take yourselves off of mute, and I'll take us off of spotlight so you can say goodbye to each other. And thank you, Chip, and good luck at the graduation to both of you. And thank you, Gabrielle and the MEA X team for putting this together. So go ahead and say goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Farewell. Au revoir.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.